Hey, what's up, everyone? John here. Let's just wait a few more minutes till it's exactly 12 p.m. Central. Yeah, so another session today, another live chat. I'm excited. I'm getting into the swing of things with, doing one every Monday through Thursday. So it's been a lot of fun. So happy to continue this. All right. I'm hoping at some point we'll have 100 viewers in the chat. That would be awesome. I appreciate the likes for sure. Nice, nice. All right, it's 12 on the dot. So welcome everyone to the super chat. I call them super chat because you can leave a super chat and I can help with your website or answer any questions you might have about Webflow. This is a live stream that I do every Monday through Thursday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 12 p.m. Central. Um, Anyone's welcome to join. You can type in the chat, ask me questions. And in these videos, if I'm not answering questions, I go over how to build in Webflow. I cover some tips and techniques that I use, and we just discuss everything about Webflow and everything about web design and development. So if you're building a site or if you want to learn how to build a site, um, hopefully this is a good resource to kind of help facilitate that. All right. So today I'll just go ahead and get started. Feel free to leave a chat, and I'll be looking at chat and answering any questions. So in the last live session on Thursday, um, we we were building this. So we're going to continue to build this. So it's this Figma file that I got from onepagelove.com, and you can find it under free templates, and you can download the Figma file or get access to this Figma file so you can follow along if you want to, or kind of see what I'm working with. So in the last session, we did have a bit of struggles with the nav bar, but luckily we got through it. I added this heading, this subheading, and these buttons. So in today's live session, I'm going to go ahead and add these three images, and I'm going to add like a cool floating interaction to them. So it has like a cool effect when the user first visits the page. So for this, I'm gonna place it in a 100% width section, so it spans the entire viewport, and I'll just add a little bit of padding on the left and the right for these images. So I'm gonna go ahead and just export these images. So in Figma, to export images, you just select the image. So here in the layers panel within Figma, you can find these images. So it's here under screens, and they're right here. So I'm just gonna select them all by holding down shift, and I'm gonna export them at 2 times here in Figma, and I'm gonna export these 3 layers. So I'll click export, and it downloads to my downloads folder. I'll just double click and double click in here. I'll just check out the images, make sure they look good, and yeah, those look good. And they'll look really good when they're smaller, because right now they're big and they look pretty decent. And yeah, usually with graphics I like to use SVG, but this graphic has so many different elements that adding it as a PNG works well. So I'll go ahead and just add them to Webflow. One practice that I like to use, and I might not do it in this one, but sometimes I rename my images. It doesn't really matter actually, because Webflow, it uploads the images to a CDN, and the file name and the URL gets renamed anyways, and then you can add alternative text to the image within the website. It's just, for me, it helps me stay organized if I rename my images. But right now, because I didn't build this Figma file, I'm okay with using the image names they have here. So boards, chatbot, and dashboard. So I'll go ahead into the assets panel in Webflow, and let me open that window, and I'll click, hold, and drag and place into here. All right, that looks good. So the next thing I'll do now that I have the images there, I'm going to go into Figma actually and just see how I want to do this. Yeah, so I see that, this is going to be interesting actually because the images, they're rotated in a specific way. So that's going to be interesting. So let me go into Webflow, and within the page wrapper, I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add another section because this bottom section is going to be 100% width, and we're not going to put it in a container because looking at this Figma file, this area down here is much wider than the content here in these buttons. So I'll go ahead and add these images. So I'm trying to think how I want to do this. Let's see. All right, so here I'm going to go into Miro. I'm going to try this tool out and just draw things out so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm thinking about. So because there's 4 images, so right, we have, let's see, the nav bar, and then we have this container, and this container has the heading, the subheading, and the buttons. Okay, I'm just trying this out, so let's see if it works out. All right, and so then for the images, there's 3 images, but I'm gonna put them in I could put it in a grid actually. Let's try that. Let's try working with grid today. I'm gonna put it in a 2x2 grid and then rotate that grid. So let's try that. I don't typically work with grid, but in this case, I feel it could work really well. Or actually, I'm going to, yeah, I think this should work well. Yeah, I'll use Flexbox and I'll wrap the images. Let's try that. So let me add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to call this image wrapper. And I'm going to set the position to flex, align center, and justify center. And then I'll go ahead and place those 3 images in. So let me see, so we have this one image, and I'm going to say image is high DPI, so it just resizes it. And then I'll place the second image, set it as image is high DPI. So because we saved it at 2 times, it's just resizing it and condensing it. So the image is actually a higher quality. It's just resizing it and using, I think, more pixels within the image. All right, so we have those 2. Let's see, we have the workboard, this one, and let me add one more image. And I'll add this one. Okay, image is high DPI. So right now there's 3 images. So what I'm going to try to do is select this image wrapper. And then for the children, I'm going to say wrap. And yeah, that kind of works. So except we want this image to be aligned to the right. So let me select this image wrapper and set it to vertical. No, let's set it to horizontal. And I want this image to be positioned all the way on the right side. So let me try something like this. No. Okay, so yeah, this should be fun to figure out here. And it looks like these images are a lot smaller here, so I'm gonna have to change that as well. Yeah, and I'm gonna rotate them individually first, and then rotate it. So yeah, this is gonna be fun to watch me figure this out. Let's see, so workboard. Yeah, I should be able to. So what I'll do is I'll add another div block actually. So it's gonna be an empty div, and I'm gonna place this div on the left side. And let me expand it. Or let me try to set it to 50%. Okay, cool. So we have this empty div here that's 50% because I want to move this image all the way to the right. So So yeah, and I feel like these images are a lot smaller. So let me just look at the size here. So the width and the height is 466 by 429. So it looks like the width is 466. So I'll go ahead and add a specific width here. I'll say 466. As we can see, it's a lot smaller. And then I'll just call this hero image. And I'll apply that same class name to this image. And the same class name, let me remove this class, call this hero image. Okay. Yeah, so let me set this div block to 466 instead of 50%. 466. And I'm going to, let me set this image wrapper to a spacing of auto, so it centers it, or it should center it. And let's see. Okay. I think grid might be the solution here. I feel like that would be the best thing for this design. Hey, what's up, Manuel? How's it going? So I'm currently creating this kind of grid here, or this these images. So yeah. So let's scrap everything I did, and I'm gonna go ahead and add, or within this div block, I'm gonna set it to a display of grid instead of flex. So I'll use grid, and grid just places elements in their own grid cell. So that looks good. I don't want any gaps here for this, and I'm cool with that. That looks good. So let me select done, and then for this grid cell, I'm gonna justify it to the right. So we have this option here, justify end, and this one looks okay. So yeah, it looks pretty good. So this is gonna be interesting. Very interesting. Okay. All right. So let's see, workboard. Yeah, this needs to go up here. Okay, got it. So this one can go there, and I'm gonna place this one up here. And this one actually needs to go all the way here. Okay, so I don't need to rotate it. Nice. Okay, so what I'll try to do here is place this one. So I'll try a position of absolute. And let me add a combo class actually to this image. So I'm going to say, give it a combo class of absolute, set the position to absolute, and I'll say top right. No. Yeah. You know what I'm almost thinking? Yeah, I'm almost thinking of something different for this. Instead of using grid entirely, because these are diagonal, so I'm going to use just position absolute. So again, I'm going to remove this grid setting from that, and I'm just going to place, I'm going to delete this div block. We don't need this. And I'm going to set the display for this image wrapper to flex, center, and I'm going to set each hero image. I'll remove this combo class. I'll set each hero image to a position of absolute and center. And let me make sure that the image wrapper is set to a position of relative. Okay. And that looks pretty good. For the height, so I do want to add some height to this. So I'm going to say for the image wrapper, let me add Let me set it to like 500 pixels. Okay. All right, so that these images are in the center. Okay, so now I'm gonna set up, give each image a combo class and then move it with the position of absolute. So I'll add a combo class of 1 to this first one, or this one is actually the third image. So let me remove that and just say 3. And then I'll just move it with the position of absolute. Let me see if I can use percentages. 100%. Nope. 50%. Let me try that on the left side. And then this one is number 2. So I want number 3. Oh, let's see. This one's on top. So I'm guessing it's this one. So this is going to be number 1. And I'll move it 50% from the right. Something like that. And 50% down. Okay, so we're getting there. I just have to move it a little bit more. So maybe, so this hero image, I'll move it down. %. Yeah, something like this. Oh, that's gonna work perfect. Something like 52. Yep, that's gonna work really well. All right, so we didn't use grid or flex at all. I just absolutely positioned everything. So just to backtrack a little bit, and let me not wrap here as well. So I added the image wrapper. I set it to a flex setting of center center, and I gave it a specific height. Let me try removing this height to see what will happen. Yeah, so it just moves everything up because it's positioned absolute. So I think I'm going to give it a height of maybe 100 VH. That's too much. Oh no, that's actually a pretty big section. Maybe something like 80 VH. So it fills 80% of the viewport. And then for the flex setting, I'll justify it to the top. Or no, this should be 100 VH. Okay, and then if I justify to the top, then I'll have to move these up. So these, yeah, that's easy enough. And I'll move this. Cool. Yep. And then I'll add some padding to the image wrapper. Oh, okay, I see. So let me place these 3 in another div block so that I have a little bit more control of, let's see, div block, hero. So I'll have to set a flex setting to center. Yeah. Let me set it to position relative. And oh, that's fun. Okay, with 100%. No, that's doing the same thing. Let me undo that. We don't need that extra div block. Okay. So yeah, instead of padding to the image wrapper, I'm just gonna add some margin. There we go. Maybe 80. So we're doing increments of 20 for this build. So yeah, that looks pretty good. So we have the 3 images, and the images feel a little bit no, they're the same size here. Okay, and maybe it could have gone in a container actually. You know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna place in this section, I'm gonna add a container. So I'll add a div block, give it the class name container. and place the image wrapper in the container. Okay, not sure what happened there. So let me set this to 100%. There we go. All right, so yeah, it's in the container. That looks good. All right, so yeah, that took a moment, but basically we're using position absolute to position these images kind of in different positions. All right, and this one's 21, so I'll do the same for this one, 21. Okay, so cool, that looks good. So now what I want to do is like add this cool effect of the images hovering. So I'm just gonna add a page load animation. So I'll go into interactions. Under page trigger, I'll click the plus. I'll say page load, and when page finishes loading, I'll start an animation. Click the plus, and I'll call this images hovering. Okay, then I'll select this first image. I'll say move. Let's move it 20%. No, that's too much. So it's going to be very subtle. So 5%. Move it 5% down. And then move it back to 0%. Okay, and 5% might be too much. So maybe like 3%. I just want them to like subtly move. And then this one, we're going to say move. Let's move it -3%. And we'll start it, start it after this one. And then we'll move it back to, thank you, Rain, appreciate it, back to 0%. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, so these should be hovering at the same time. So it moves, and yeah, that looks good. And then this one we'll move it -5%. Let's try that. Start it at the beginning, and then we'll move it back to 0%. Yeah, okay. And then I'm just gonna add easing to all of these. So I'm gonna say like ease in out, or just ease. And then duration, we're gonna make it like 2 seconds, so very long. Yeah, and then this third one needs to move a little bit differently. So this one I'm gonna move it -7. Yeah, I don't like that it moves similar to this one. So I'll add a delay to this one. I'll add a delay of 0.5. And I'll add a delay to this one to, let's say, 0.25. No, I don't quite like the delay either. So delay, I'm going to set it to 0. That actually doesn't look bad. I'm going to move this one. Let me try 7. Let's try that. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So this is going to be -5. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So actually what I'm going to do, I have another idea here. So 0 goes like this. And then Yeah, let me try. Okay, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to say 3 and then -3. So I want them to hover up and down. This second one is -5. I'm going to say 5. This third one is 7. So I'm going to say -7 instead of 0. So it goes like this, like that. Okay, that doesn't look bad. We'll finesse it, but I'm going to loop it now and see how it looks. It goes like this. Yes, that's not bad. I like this one. I feel like this top one could move a bit more. So let's select it, and I'm gonna move it. Let's move it 10%. I know that's kind of, that could look cool though. So first one, 10, and then I'll move it back -10. Okay. Yeah. And then, let me see if this works. Let me select these 3, right click, duplicate. Oh, that's awesome. And set it to 0. Okay. It's just gonna do its thing. I don't think it needs the 0, so we're gonna delete that. But the easing, I'm not quite a fan of the easing. So let's do easing out. Yeah, kind of like that. And we'll make it slower. So the duration will say 4 seconds. And then for this one, I'm actually going to move it down, something like this. Yeah, this one's a little bit too far. No, don't like that. They can't overlap. Hey Craig, how's it going? I'm just creating this little animation here. So we're rebuilding this Figma file, and I'm creating like this hover effect for this section here for these 3 images. I just want to create kind of like some dynamic movement here. This one's moving a bit too much. So this is image 2. So instead of 5, let's do -3 and 3. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, I just want it to be really subtle. And this one's moving too much. Okay, this is the last thing I'll do. So as you can see, like, this is my thought process behind creating interactions. You know, I want everything to look nice and smooth, and kind of make sense. Yeah, that doesn't look bad. All right, we'll come back to it. I don't want to spend too much time. I could spend the whole video working on this interaction. But yeah, just want to add some dynamic things there. And this one should not. Okay, last thing. So 1, let me set it to 5, and initially let me set it to -5, and then back to 5. Okay. All right, we'll come back to it, but you get the idea. I'm trying to get this to hover correctly. Let's move on to the next section. Or actually, there's one more piece here. There's a gradient here at the bottom. So the images are covered by this gradient. So I'm going to go ahead in this section. So we have the container, and let's see. yeah, I'm going to add it to the section here. So the section, I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to give it the class name gradient bottom, and I'll set the gradient, let's see here. So the height is 500. Let's set it to 50 VH. And I'm going to set the container relative. I'm going to set the position of this to absolute and bottom. Okay, so this gradient bottom should be, let's see, section, container, gradient bottom. Why isn't it at the bottom? Let's see, section, oh, because the section needs a position of relative. Okay, so now it's at the bottom, and I'll give this the background of, select the background here, or image and gradient, click the plus, and I'll choose a gradient. And the bottom, we want it to be black, and the top transparent. Okay, and there we go. And I can move this up a little bit, something like this. Or actually, I'm gonna make, let's see, this image wrapper a little bit smaller, so maybe like 80 VH. Yeah, and that way there's like a dark gradient here, which looks good. Nice. And for this image, I'm gonna give it a higher Z index, so I'm gonna say 50, so it comes to the front. This one I'm gonna say 49, and this one I'm gonna say 50 as well. I'll say 51. Okay, so this top image is behind these two. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, not bad, not bad. This one's moving too much. Okay. Yeah, so far so good. If there's any questions, let me know. I'm going to change this bottom gradient to the same color as the website background, which is 181818. And yeah, that looks good. And then for the top, instead of transparent, I'm going to do white, but give it a like really low alpha of like 10. And then I'll set the Z index of this div block to 99. So it goes in front. And that's not quite what I'm looking for. So let's work on this a little bit. So this is black. Actually, I'm going to do 181818. And then here I'll set the alpha to really low. Yep, that's it. Okay, cool. So there's the both colors on the same end, except I reduced the alpha or the opacity of the top gradient so that these bottom images feel like they have a little bit of a covering underneath. And it's just a subtle effect, but I think it's kind of nice. All right, it's looking good. Very nice. So yeah, we're finished with this top section. Now let's move on to this section, which is features. And yeah, that looks good. So let's go into the designer, into the navigator. I'm going to add another section, and I'm going to, let's see, this is a heading. We have the subheading, and this is an H2 heading, a secondary heading. So this is the H1, and then we're going to add a secondary heading. So let's go and add a heading. and go ahead and add a heading in here. I'm going to set it to H2. And actually, before I do that, in the section, I'll add a div block and give it the class name container. So we'll have a container, and then in here, we'll add a heading. Perfect. And we'll make this an H2 heading. All right, I'll style the H2 heading. So this is, let's look at the properties here. So this heading is, let me get some water here. Let's see, secondary heading. It's 52 pixels and 62 pixel line height. Okay. So I'm going to say all H2 headings. I'm going to set the font to Roboto, set the color to white, set the size to 52 and line height to 62. And the font weight is 400. So 400, and then I'll say features. Cool. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and copy this subheading because I think it's the same size. Yep. So I'll just copy this subheading, paste it in here, and I'll grab the text. So this text here, copy it, and paste in here. Cool. So far, so good. And then we have this section here. So for this, I'm just going to add a div block and 2 other div blocks. So for example, let me just open this. And I'll delete this. So, excuse me. So for this, we have, we're going to add 1 div block. And then we're going to add a div block in here and another div block here. This is going to have a flex setting. So the parent wrapper is going to be flex, and it's going to be horizontal so that these sit side by side. And then within this div block, I'm going to add this image. So we're going to add an image in here, and then I'm going to add another image, set it to position absolute, and here we're going to just have like 3 div blocks to add these different bullet points. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me go into Webflow, and so the first thing I'll do is add a div block, and I'm going to call this features wrapper. I'll set it to a width of 100%, and I'll add another, or actually, yeah, let's set the flex setting to flex, horizontal, align stretch, and justify left will work here. And I'll add another div block, and I'll call this features left. So this is going to be the left side, and I'm going to set this to, let's say 70%. And then, just so we can see this better, I'm going to temporarily add some height to this. So we have this features wrapper, and let's see, let's set it to 60% actually, 60%. Then I'll add another div block, and I'll just say grow if possible right here. So it fills the available space, and I'll call this features right. Okay, so we have this left div block and we have this right one. So in this left one, we're going to add the image. So I'll go ahead in here and I'll look for those images. So it's right here. So I'll just select both of these, go into export to layers at 2 times. Okay, gonna show in Finder, and let's see, so it's this one. So I have these 2 images, and go into my assets panel and drag and drop right in there. Very nice. And I'll go ahead and remove the height from this features wrapper. We don't need it. Once we add the image, it's going to add height automatically. So in the left side, I'm going to grab this image, click, hold, and drag, and place on the left. And there we have the image. I'm going to say image is high DPI. Looks good. And I'll call this features left image. And then for the features left, for this div block, I'm going to set it to a position of relative. And then we'll add that other image in. So I'll select add an element. I'll add another image in here. Choose image, and I'll choose this line chart image. Set image is high DPI, and I'll position, and I'll say features second, features left second image. I'll set this position to a position of absolute and bottom right. Okay, and then I'll just move this down and to the right, something like this. Okay, I don't like that it has a white border, but that's how the image is set up here. All right, we don't want it that far off. Nice. For this section, I'm just going to add some padding temporarily, or some margin, or just add some height temporarily, 1000, so we have some scroll space there while we're building. Okay, so that's the left side. Let me go ahead and start adding the right side. So for this right side, we have these icons here. So I'm just double clicking in and going into the icon here. So we have this vector. So I'm going to select it and go to export as SVG. We can preview it. So we have that icon there. I'll click export, and then I'll find these other icons in here. Okay, I'm gonna export this icon and this icon here. Okay, so yeah, let's go back into here, and I'm gonna add those icons into the assets panel, and just gonna click, hold, and drag, place in there. We have the icons. Yeah, so hopefully everyone's been able to follow along well. I know it's kind of a lot of information I'm covering, but yeah, at least you get to kind of see how I approach a build in Webflow. Okay, so we have this area here. So for this, I'm gonna add, let's see, three div blocks in here. Let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, so let's see. Okay, yep, so I'm gonna add a div block. I'm gonna call this, I'm just gonna call it feature. Feature, and then where's a good resource to learn Flexbox? I get confused with which settings apply to the parent versus the children. It's always trial and error for me, so I get it working, but it's normally luck. Yeah, that's a really good question, Craig. Let me go ahead and we'll just run through a quick example of using Flexbox. So I just created a new page. Let me add a section. Set this to 100 VH. So when using Flexbox, you want to apply it to the parent element. So let's say I wanted 2 columns in this section, or let's add a container just to stay consistent with the design. I'll add a max width of 1200 and set the spacing to auto. So let's say within this container I wanted 2 columns. I would apply the flex setting to this container. So here I would select flex, and horizontal, align, stretch, and justify, start. So you can align it and justify however you want in here. And then once I add a div block, so I'll add a div block and then I can add another one, it'll put them side by side because it is positioned flex. So let me give this a specific width and height. So yeah, I'll give it, let's say 300 by 300. Okay. And we'll make it, sure, red. If I were to paste, we see that these two div blocks are side by side. And that's because this div block, I'll call it the parent, has a flex setting of horizontal and align, stretch, and justify, start. If I were to say justify center, we can see these two blocks move to the center. And I'll add a border here. So these two blocks move to the center. If I were to add vertical to the parent element, it aligns them vertically. And if I were to align center, it aligns them to the center. I can align them to the right, left. And if I say horizontal, it'll do it horizontally. So I can keep adding div blocks in here. And I could even wrap these. So if I selected the parent element and I said wrap, well, actually the div block would have to be smaller, but if I set a specific width to this div block, it would kind of create like a grid. So let me try like 600. Yeah. So that was a bit confusing. Sorry about that. But yeah, basically you want to apply it to the parent element, and then these are the children. Anything inside of it are the children. So these two are the children, and then you apply the flex setting to the parent element. So horizontal, vertical. Another kind of cool thing I like to show, instead of giving a specific width to the children, so I'm going to remove this width, you could set the sizing here to grow if possible, and then whatever div block is in the parent element, it'll try to fill that available space. So let's say I wanted 6 columns. I could just apply the grow if possible property to the children, and then I can just paste as many div blocks in there, and they'll just fill the available space, and you don't have to do any math or calculations with it, because we're saying, yeah, fill the parent element, you know, and use up the available space. If I wanted 12 columns, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, yep, or 3 columns, just like that. And then you can set the height for these columns or add content, and it would automatically adjust the height of the content, or adjust the height of the div block. Hopefully that was clear. Yeah, and then I could copy this parent element and have more columns and things like that. I could add padding or margin to the children element to create spacing. And we could create a really nice website layout using Flexbox. You can also use grid. I don't use grid as often. I like Flexbox because what's great about Flexbox and grid as well, you know, you just have to get proficient with grid. But now that I have these 3 columns, I can go into tablet, and on tablet I can be like, hey, I don't want it to be horizontal, I want it to be vertical. And then we'd have to, if there was content in these columns, they would, and I have to set the width to 100% width. Nope, that's the parent, sorry. Let me go into the children, because the children didn't have any, yeah, okay, got it. So yeah, let me shrink if possible. So I do have to change the flex setting here because I changed it to vertical for the parent, and I had to change the grow if possible setting here for the children, and then I'll apply, you know, a width of 100%. And for these, I can give them more margin. So with for the parent element, I can add some padding of like 40, and then I can give margin to the children element. So on desktop, it's horizontal. On tablet, it's vertical. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that was clear. I know with the sizing property, it can get a little confusing when going to, from desktop to tablet, but you do want to apply the flex setting to the parent, and then you can apply, different settings to the children. Cool, thank you. I guess I get confused when we start adding divs within these children. Yeah, so if you were to add divs inside of here, so I'll go ahead and go into the desktop. If I were to add a div block in here, and let's just set it to 300 or to 100 by 100. So we have that div block. I'll change the color and also add a border here to 3. Okay, so we have a div block in here. So if I wanted to move this div block relative to, so now this child becomes the parent of this div block, right? So this div block is a child of this div block, and this red div block is a child of this parent div block. So now this becomes a parent as well, and this becomes a child. So if I wanted to position this div block somewhere in here, so I could select this div block and then give this one a flex setting, and then I can move this one around inside of this red one. So if I wanted that to be centered, I could do that. And because these all have the same class name, I'm able to, they all have the same properties. So we see it has the class name children. Or I could say child. Child would be better. And yeah. So now because this is the parent, it wouldn't be positioned relative to the grandparent. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, it's some interesting concepts there with parents and children. These are actually siblings. So these two children are siblings. And in interactions, you can select sibling elements. So these red div blocks are all siblings. These yellow ones are not siblings because they're each inside of a parent element. If I were to copy and paste these two yellow ones, these two would be siblings, right? But this one has its own parent, this one has its own parent, these two have the same parent, and these three have the same parent. All right, cool. That was an interesting concept to cover. Hopefully that helped. And yeah, let's go back in here. Yeah, for this features wrapper, let me go ahead and add some margin to the top, like 40. So we have this feature. I'll go ahead and kind of finish this up here. So we have this icon, this text, and it's just a title, and this paragraph. Okay, so I'll add a div block in here for the feature, and I'll call this feature top. And in here, I'll add an image, choose image. I'll select this icon, and then we'll add a text block. And I'll just copy this. Let me just get this text, copy, and I'll paste in here. And then for the features top, I'll give it a flex setting of flex and horizontal. Excuse me, and align center so that the icon and the text are aligned correctly. Yeah, for sure. Happy to help, Craig. Cool. So here the font weight is 500 and the size is 20 and pixel line height is 30. So for the size, I'll say 20, line height 30, the color I'll say white, and then for the font I'll say Roboto. All right, single source of truth, and the font weight 500. And we'll move it, give it a margin of 10. And nice, that looks pretty good. All right, so then within this features wrapper, or the feature, I'm gonna set a flex setting of flex and then vertical, and then I'll add another div block. So it goes below it, and I'll call this feature bottom. Okay, And then I'll just copy this text. And I'll add a paragraph text. And I'll call this feature text. And the size is 16, line height is 24. Yeah, and then that looks good. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, and then the margin, we'll say 20 pixels from the top. Very nice. And let me see something here. So let's see features right. Let me set a flex setting. Justify right. No. Center. No. Yeah, no, that looks good. So what I'll do for this features right is just add some margin. So maybe like 60 from this left side. And yeah, that looks good. So I know I just covered a lot there with this feature section. Let me call this feature heading. So I'll draw this out just to kind of explain what I did. So this little box, let me draw an arrow over here. And I'm still learning this program, so bear with me while I move it. Okay, cool. So for that, I'll get better with drawing as I do more of these. So this is the feature box, right? It's just a box. And we added a top section to it and a bottom section, or bottom div. So for the parent, this is the parent. We gave it a flex setting of vertical so that these two boxes stacked on top of each other. And then inside this top one, we gave it a flex setting of horizontal so that the image and the text aligned horizontally to each other, and we set it to center. So there's consistent alignment there. And then for this bottom one, we didn't do anything. We just added the paragraph text in here. All right, so again, the feature wrapper, then the top and the bottom. And then for the top, we added a flex of horizontal. And this one, the parent, has a flex of vertical. Okay, so it's kind of like Legos in a way, like building blocks. You're kind of, okay, can't, sorry about that. That was vertical. Okay, it's kind of like Legos, and you know, if you do have Legos, or you have like some physical things that might help you understand this, that could work. Or like maybe just take a piece of paper and, you know, create squares, and then you could think of it as like building blocks, right? We're putting blocks inside of blocks, and we're aligning blocks in this specific way to achieve a specific result. In this case, it's to create this this feature section. It does seem like a lot just to create that, but that's the box model, and it does make it easier once we get to responsive design. Like I could completely change the layout of this in on tablet or mobile, and I might showcase that. We're getting near the end, but what I'll do is I'll just copy each feature. So we have this feature, and I'll just copy and paste it 3 times. So I'll have to select the features right and say vertical, and that's it. And then for each feature, so I'll select it down here, I'll add some margin from the bottom of like, let's say 30. Let me go to desktop. Features right, yeah, vertical, okay. There we go. And select feature and apply margin to the bottom, maybe 40. And then I'll just replace the image here for each one. Replace image, call it that, and then I'll replace this image. Okay, and I'll go in here and just copy the text. Intuitive interface, and copy this paragraph text. copy, and I'll paste in here. Oh, they all have the same text, so that's fine. And cool. All right, so yeah, that section looks good. And I might add some more margin to this one, maybe 80. Okay, so that's looking very similar to this. And actually I can see that this is aligned to the top and this is aligned to the bottom, so to the center. So I'll select the features right and justify center, so it moves it down a bit. Cool. Features wrapper, container, and section. So let me remove this height from the section, reset. Nice. I'll just add some padding to this section. Something like this. Yeah, we'll work with the padding. So features, let's see, features heading. I'm just gonna give it more margin from the top there, so it's a little bit more separate from this top part. All right, so let's see how that's looking. Not bad. Let me select the features wrapper and add like 80 pixels. Okay. All right, yeah, that's looking very similar to the Figma design. I'm happy with it. Very nice. So let's go ahead and publish and just see how it looks in the browser. Any questions before I end the live stream? So I'll go ahead and preview. And we animated these 3 images. We have the feature section with this kind of weird border on this image down here, but that's how it was exported, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. And one last thing I'll kind of cover. So like I was saying, because we're using Flexbox, it makes it really easy to adjust the flex setting, let's say on tablet. So on tablet, what I'm going to do is select the features wrapper, and instead of horizontal, I'm going to say vertical, and then I'll say center. Okay. And actually, let's do justify left. And then for this features right, I'm going to say just align center and remove the margin. And I can make it wider, so I could, let me set the sizing here. I can set this to 50%. And yeah, and then let's see. So for this image, I could, so features left, I could set this to 100%. For features left, it makes everything larger. And then for this features bottom, or features right, I can add some margin like this. And let's center the content. Yeah, so I would, work with the alignment here on tablet, but that just gives you an idea of how easy it is to readjust things from desktop to tablet using Flexbox. On tablet, I can align things vertically, whereas on desktop, I'm doing more horizontal alignment because we have more real estate or more space to work with the website. So yeah, so far so good. We have the top part work at the speed of thought. And then we have the features section. And then tomorrow we'll go ahead and create this contents section. So as I add more sections, I'll work on the spacing in between each section. And let me see, this first section doesn't have a class name. Yeah, so I'll call this features section. And then here I'll do this, just to stay organized, I'll call this hovering images section. And this section, we'll call it hero section. Okay, so in the navigator, I kind of have it a bit more organized so I know which section is which. So it's in a page wrapper. Then we have different sections. Each section has a container, and then within the container we have the elements that we're building for each section. Okay, so it's just a nice way to stay organized. You'll see that a lot in web design. You'll see a section being added, then a container, and each container has a max width of 1200 pixels. So if the screen does get larger than 1200 pixels, the content will still stay nice and centered, so the user is not seeing the website expand if they have a really large monitor. You know, I could, like for example, if I preview this, I'll go ahead and publish, and then I'll preview. All right. So if I zoom out here on Chrome, like the screen is, there's more real estate, but we can see the content is nicely in the center, right? It's not trying to fill the entire viewport. Okay, so yeah, so far so good. We'll adjust the spacing in between the different sections once everything's built out, and fine tune little things. So as we're building, you know, I might not fine tune a lot because I'm just focused on each section individually. But once all the sections are built, we'll just go through and, you know, like a fine-tooth comb, and just add, you know, specific margins and more width and spacing in different places. Okay, so that's it for today's live stream. Yeah, kind of a slower paced one because I was working on the interaction and we're just adding elements. But yeah, this is just an open space for anyone who has any questions about Webflow or wants to learn Webflow and wants to see someone build live in Webflow. So yeah, thanks for joining everyone. Thanks Manuel, Rain, Craig. Thanks for the chats. And yeah, hope you have a good one. And I will be here tomorrow at the same time, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. And yeah, check out webdevforyou.com. Check out my templates. I have a ton of free clonable projects. If you like cool animations, you can go to webdevforyou.com, go to interactions. These are all free. You can copy and paste them or clone them into your Webflow dashboard. This is the latest one here that I created. It's just a animated menu button. But there's over 150 interactions that you can take a look at. Like, let's see, this one right here is pretty cool. It's an interesting menu that opens up and then, you know, disappears. And then there's also another cool one I like. This one here, it's like a GUI menu that pops out from the right. You know, so you can clone this into your dashboard and just see how I built it. You know, I did use Illustrator to build something like this and After Effects, but just to give you an idea of like how I added the elements and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure, Manuel. Definitely, yeah, happy to help. Yeah, thanks, Craig. All right, so yeah, that's it for today's video. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.